You all members of the Shura? All of you? Right. How many members? How many?
108 were present at the election time.
Acha, mashallah. But how many reported altogether?
Registration.
108 got registered, right. MashaAllah. Sharma Sahib, since when have you joined Khudamul Ahmadiyya? Huh? MashaAllah. Not yet. So do something about it. It's high time.
He's Rishta Nata in charge as well.
Acha, so you have to be kind and courteous to him. Now, this is a question-answer session, as you are so familiar with this. So now I invite you. Yaya Mackenzie, how are you? Have seen you after ages. Where have you been? All right, let's start with the question-answer session now. Where are the chairs?
These are chairs organized.
Which ones? These?
This row and then going back there.
Acha, they're all here waiting for their time
Yes.
to ask questions?
Yes.
Okay, then start with the first.
Assalamu alaikum, Huzur.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Huzur, can I start before asking my question, can I request some prayers for my Taya? He has just been admitted to hospital
When?
today.
Acha.
Sorry, yesterday. I just came from.
What happened?
His name is Qazi Munir Bhatti.
No, what happened?
He has not been well, and he's been in a lot of pain, and then he couldn't bear it, and then he was admitted to hospital. I believe it was yesterday.
Is he the elder son of Bashir Bhatti Sahib marhum?
Yes.
Huh?
Yes,
Right?
that's right, yes.
Right. So, next the question, please, now.
Yes, the question, Huzur, is I was having a discussion with Baha'i, and he said that everything, as is written in the Holy Quran, has got an ajalan musamma. Everything has a fixed term.
Right.
And he said it is also the case with Islam. And a time will come when Islam will also be finished, and then another religion
No,
will come.
but where is that mentioned in the Quran about the Quran? The Holy Quran speaks of a definite period for everything, but it also speaks for a definite period for moon and sun and the universe. So does it mean that the universe will come to an end in the lifetime of Baha'is, and then they will take over from there on? Just to say that everything will come to an end is a general statement which is not challenged or denied by any sane man on earth. So, out of this statement, how can they find an evidence in the favor of their truth? It's a universal truth. Any Tom, Dick and Harry can say, because this is the universal truth, so we are right, we have started a new religion. It doesn't mean sense at all. Does it?
Yes.
Unless they prove from the Quran has said about itself that it will come to an end. This book will be no more a valid currency by God. It will come to an end and finish. And from then on, a new book will be revealed. Unless this statement is proved to be found in the Holy Quran, the Baha'i argument has no basis whatsoever. Okay?
Yes, but he also mentioned.
The Holy Quran, on the contrary, says it is a book which has been well guarded and well protected, and none can touch it. No man or Satan will be permitted to alter this book.
Yeah.
And this is proved beyond a shadow of doubt that the book is not altered. So when this statement is correct, then until the Baha'is show the alteration in the book, the time of this book will continue.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Well, Sam?
So, question is about when we say, especially in Pakistan, about evil eye, or if I explain in Urdu like nazar lag jana, what is the reality behind that?
I think it should be experimented on you. People say, mashallah, you're very healthy and strong. And the next day you find you suffering from diarrhea, then let me know. All right? I think you're more worried about your child than yourself.
No, every time we listen to some arguments that yes, every elder normally say that when somebody is running about the child or even the elders that isko nazar na lag jaye.
I know that, and I have answered you, I think. But what I mean to say further to my answer, I have been speaking on this subject at different occasions, in depth and at length. And I thought you were present in some of those occasions, and you should have got the answer by now. To say that human mind can work on other human minds is not only true, it is well supported by the Holy Quran. Because in case of the bout between Moses and the magicians of Pharaoh, this exactly is the inference drawn by the Holy Quran, that it was the eyes of the people who were spellbound. What was that which bound the eyes and made them see things which were not there? They began to see things which were imaginary. This is hypnotism. So if an evil person who has that out of practice or by nature, who has been provided with this faculty of influencing others by just exerting his mind on something, upon somebody, then such a person can bring about some evil on the object of his mental concentration. So as far as the institution of influencing others through mental concentration or through the specific stare of one's eyes is concerned, this is scientific, this is established scientifically, and it is also supported by the Holy Quran, as I have just mentioned. There is no doubt about it. But to live always in fear and in a state of superstitious atmosphere, where everybody thinks, child who falls here and says maybe he's got the bad side of somebody, that is stupidity. The incidence of inflicting some harm upon others through the mental power is far less than the possibility of somebody inflicting harm otherwise, in so many other ways is concerned. There's so many ways, 101 ways of people, children falling ill and making mixed steps and breaking their bones and doing this and that, eating something poisonous, or breathing polluted air and getting asthma as an effect of that. The possibilities of harm reaching people and children are so many. And this one is one small possibility which is very rare. So because we say it is possible, it doesn't mean that people should start considering every time they fall ill or something befalls them that they have been influenced by an evil eye. The life will become superstitious if you do that. If, suppose, every time your child becomes ill and some ignorant woman suggests that this child has he's been targeted by an evil eye, then what is the answer? The answer is, all right, if the evil eye has produced some physical effect, we'll try to counter that by medicine, by treating the child. And when you start doing it, the child will be cured. You understand?
Yeah.
So that would in fact prove that it was not an evil eye. It was just some mishap which resulted in the child's illness. And again, if suppose you are convinced that it was after all evil eye, it was not caused by any physical instrument or physical means, then what is the answer? The answer is you should pray, you should say La hawla wa la quwwata, you should seek refuge with Allah, say A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, and the evil thoughts will be dispelled. And of that also we have a proof in the Holy Quran in the same incident which I referred to, the bout between Moses and the magicians. He didn't exert any mental pressure upon them. He didn't even try to influence them through the power of his mind. He himself was so scared. How could he counter that influence by his superior will? Every time he threw his staff and it appeared to turn into a python or a big snake, he ran away. That was his mental power. So when such a person, as weak as Moses was, in his resolution and bravery, every time God had to tell him, no, don't run away, please stop, stay, I am with you. Then what worked for him? What was that? It was God's superior power. So God has already shown you. If I can do it for one person, I can do it for another person too. Only you have to beseech me, you have to come to seek my help and seek my refuge. So that is the only thing permissible to a Muslim, to seek Allah's refuge and forget about the other things. Otherwise you will live in a world of superstition from which you will never be able to extricate yourself. Okay?
Jazakallah.
Assalamu alaikum, Hazrat.
Walsam?
So this question has been bothering me ever since I heard it. That in an event of war, i.e. jihad, when if you're fighting, especially against people who are fighting to stop you practicing Islam, and in the bounties of when you capture the army, amongst the bounties, if you capture their people and the women, they are also become your property. I heard the word londi. But the question that bothers me, although I've heard that it's in Islam it's advisable or preferred that you should release them and get them married amongst themselves, but the question that bothers me is that while they're your property, as I heard it, it sounds horrible that you can use them as mistresses or use them as you wish because they are your property. This is a question that has been bothering me since I heard it.
The Holy Quran has used the word whoever is under your right hands, that is under your command. They are under your care. This is the meaning. And the situation which is discussed in the Holy Quran is that of a war with an enemy which practices these things, not with an enemy which treats women with respect. In fact, this was a custom of the entire world for a long time. Only recently these customs have started changing, but not enough. The custom was that there were no camps for war prisoners, and the prisoners were distributed to the soldiers who became victorious or who won a temporary victory over the enemy and got some prisoners, among them women as well. Now the enemy or the warring parties, both of them, they, according to the established custom, treated these women as their real property. They could do anything to do them, whatever they like. But instead of handing them over to the wolves' pack, only they were handed over to one person, so that at least he doesn't go beyond certain limits to do bad things to a person. So then belonging would be to one person and he would be responsible, and no one else in the society will have access to that lady. Now, if this is done by the enemy, and if it is not done by the Muslim party involved with some enemy, then the ladies of the non-believers who already have a very low moral standard, they'll be treated with deep respect like they're ladies. And the real chaste ladies of Islam will be treated like they are beasts. That is not evil, even. I mean, that's not justice. That's not an equitable arrangement. That is why in wars, everywhere, even today, it is an established principle, almost like an unwritten law, that as the enemy treats your soldiers, your prisoners belonging to your people, so also you have the right to counter that by doing exactly the same things. Now, this is a universal principle to keep people in check. If it were not practiced, then the enemy could go beyond all limits in transgressing against a well-behaved people. They have limits, they will not cross, and they have no limits, so they can do as whatever they like. This had to be brought to a check and to a halt. This is why the Holy Quran speaks of this situation, as says that you have certain permission from God to treat these women. But you are not permitted to make any transgression against them. You are not permitted to treat them as commodities. And many conditions are laid upon your treatment of the prisoners of war, which create a new category of prisoners of war, which was never seen like that before, not only in that age, but even today. If you read the conditions attached to the prisoners of war in Islam, the teaching is so highly civilized and so highly cultured that even in the modern wars, you can't find any such thing even close to that. Haven't you read about the treatment meted out to the prisoners of war by both sides, Germany and England and all the belligerent nations?
Yeah. Well, I've witnessed it myself in Bosnia.
Haven't you seen the places, the war prisons?
Yeah.
And how these women were treated, and how these children were treated, and how in forced labor and with being poorly fed, they died out of, gradually killing hunger, which would not kill them suddenly, but it was a lingering torture by hunger, which ultimately destroyed them. I've seen the pictures of those prisoners. I've seen the prisons themselves in Germany, wherever they are kept preserved. So you can't say it was just Germany. They were treated alike everywhere. The Germany went forward a bit too much, but the treatment of other prisoners of war, by Japanese for instance, most horrid. So even today, when people boast of such advanced civilization, the treatment of prisoners of war is far below that standard, which is laid down as a rock bottom standard by Islam. So in respect of those women who were captured, imagine what could be done to them. Number one, some among them were married, separated from their husbands. Some were not married, and the fate of war hanging was hanging, not in balance, but was so precariously hanging, anything could happen. Although the Muslims believed they would become victorious, but this is the general state of statement about wars which applies to every such situation. The wars are uncertain things. So what would you do with those ladies? There is no separate war camp. The result would be, if they are left free, then they will play havoc with the chastity of the whole society. Then they will be free to go here and there and give vent to their own passions while they are not properly trained and educated. They come from a free, much freer society than what we find in Islam. Now, if you don't permit that, then I believe much more damage would be done, not only to those ladies themselves, but to the society as a whole. The proof is that after every war in Europe, the moral standard went down the drain like a ton of bricks. It sank suddenly so deep that all those who keep count of these things, they have written books on this. They say there is a very definite proof that every war lowers the standard of morality in the area where the war is fought. So Islam provides a legal outlet. And who does it? God. Now, if it is God, this is the question which you must address. Then there is no crime involved, because He is the maker of law. Al-amru kulluhu lillah. He is the master. He made the institution of marriage, and He prohibited you from doing this and from doing that, and permitted you to do this or do that. So who is the maker of law? If a law is proclaimed by God, that in such situation, under limited conditions, you are permitted to have husband and wife relationship with such women, then where is the immorality of that? The alternative cannot be conceived. This is the only course which was available, but not devised by people themselves, but a course which was advised by God. If that had not happened, I can't imagine what might have happened then. Then they were told to treat all the slaves, not only women, but all the slaves, with such respect that they should feed them with what they feed themselves on, feed themselves with, and they should dress them in the clothes in which they dress themselves. The result was that it was sometimes very difficult for people to distinguish between a slave and a master. And repeatedly we find reference in the Islamic history that even a caliph walking to market for shopping along with somebody, and people don't know who is the master and who is the slave. Once Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu asked for 2 pieces of cloth for some suit, and he chose exactly the similar ones. So the cloth merchant said, "Why do you have 2 pieces of exactly the similar pattern, color and everything? I have other designs, I have other patterns. Why don't you choose from that?" He said, No, this other one is for my slave. He said, "For your slave?" He said, "Yes." He said, "I heard Rasul Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Dress them in what you dress yourselves. Make them eat of what you eat." So this is the Islamic teaching. And the respect shown to these slave women is unparalleled in the history of relationship of war. It is said that if they bear a child, then they are like your lawfully wed wives. They have all the rights which the wives have. And their children will not be considered illegitimate. They would be like legitimate children, and they would have all the rights on the society and on your property. Was this ever done by any people in the world? in treatment to vis-a-vis their treatment to prisoners of war? So look at it in the totality, and then you'll understand that Islamic teaching is far more respectable and civilized than any practice or any teaching by any people of the world at any age. If you study the injunctions relating to slaves in Islam, you'll be amazed at the beauty of that. People say Islam permits to enslave others. It's false. The Holy Quran is the only book which says no slaves can be made of free human beings except out of a bloody war where the battle is fierce and a lot of blood is shed. Not out of skirmishes. You go out and you have a skirmish. According to the Holy Quran, it is forbidden to enslave anybody out of a skirmish you have in your journey or anywhere. So it lays down the condition, a fierce, bloody battle is waged. As a result of that, when prisoners come, they are the only way of they are the only valid prisoners of war. About other situations regarding the prisoners of war, now about slaves, we find more than 12 ways of releasing the prisoners, but no other way of enslaving them, enslaving free human beings, except the war which I have just mentioned. But you read in the Holy Quran at so many places, if you do this, if you commit such a sin, if you make such an omission, the punishment for that is liberate a slave, or liberate 10 slaves, or liberate so many slaves. And then the Holy Quran also mentions the possibility of a slave to force his freedom by entering into a contract which is called mukatabat. And this is written in the Holy Quran. If a slave thinks that he wants to earn his freedom by paying him after he is freed, and if he renders enough guarantees to the effect that he will keep his contract, then if the master of that slave or a woman or a maid slave refuses to do that, the Islamic State has the authority to enforce this. Many cases are reported when some masters insisted, no, we don't trust you, or under one excuse or another, they said, we are not going to liberate you. The slave went to the Caliph and said, this is what he says and this is what I say. And the Caliph heard both the sides and said, no, you must liberate him. The Holy Quran does not leave you any room to impose your own decision upon him. If he meets the conditions laid down in the Holy Quran, you have no choice but to liberate him. Have you ever heard of such master-slave relationship anywhere in the world?
No.
It's unbelievable. So many openings are made for the slaves to go out. And the inlet is only one, that of a fierce war. But there also the Holy Quran repeatedly lays a condition that you cannot do to your enemy what the enemy doesn't do to you. People don't observe this. It's a most beautiful and most effective measure to prevent all evil practices in war relationship. It plugs all holes. It says that if enemy transgresses against you, only then you have a right to transgress against him. If enemy insults you, only then you have a right to insult him. If the enemy kills you in a certain way, which is not proper, only then you can use that improper manner, but exactly to the extent that the enemy has done to you. Not an iota beyond, and repeatedly warns that if you must revenge, do it up to the extent that enemy does it. Now, this is the principal teaching which governs every other provision. And according to my understanding of this provision, I believe that if an enemy at war does not mistreat your women or uses them as their wives, etc., does not permit free relationship with them to their soldiers, then you have no right to do the same things to their women. So this permission is also conditional, because the conditions I am mentioning, the overriding conditions, are common and repeatedly emphasized. So that is why I say they are overriding conditions. Now that is one side of the picture, and the other is those who claim they are the champions of freedom of slaves and emancipation of mankind, much later than Islam, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, what were they doing? Enslaving Africa, poor African people and others, and sending them en masse like herded sheep or other cattle to America for selling them in American markets, and they had no right whatsoever. You read the history of those slaves, you'll be absolutely, you'll be tortured to read that. It's a thorough punishment to study that history. They have no right whatsoever. You can put them to labor day and night. You can ask them to do things which you will be ashamed of doing yourselves. While in Islam, the Holy Prophet tells, according to in the light of the Quranic teaching, warns us that only take that much work from your slaves which they can easily perform. You cannot overload them. You cannot overburden them. Never take any work from your slaves which you yourself are ashamed to do. If you can't do it, you can't take it from your slaves. Then he says, apart from feeding them alike, sometimes ask your slaves to sit on the table and you serve them. Have you ever heard such a teaching anywhere? About the enslaving of a free person, like I mentioned in the history of Christian peoples dealing with poor Africa, the Holy Quran, Hazrat Muhammad ﷺ warned. He said, God, those people whom God hates most, among them are those who capture a free man whom God had created free and turn him into a slave. You see? How more emphatically it could be denied man the right to enslave anyone else. The Holy Prophet says God hates those people most. There are some people whom God hates most. One of the categories, anyone captures a person who was born free by God, and this man enslaved him. So this proves that my understanding of the Quran, as I said, that there is no way of making any slave except under a certain condition is right. It is fully supported by Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah. Okay?
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, Hazur.
Wa alaikum salam. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
How's your hockey?
We lost badly on Wednesday, I'm afraid.
I think your average age
Is losing.
is about Ansarullah's age, isn't it?
At 36.
Call yourself Khuddam, I know that.
Yeah, at 36.
But the
I'm
average age you have in that team is Ansarullah age.
I think you're right.
But first of all, it was all right because it was the first stage of Ansarullah. Now your team is entering the second stage. This is the problem. You see? So do something. I have been warning you for last many years. For God's sake, have new recruits from among the youth. Allah's blessing, of course, it was that He granted you some victories, which you didn't earn, of course. But how long? After all, the laws of nature do take over.
I'm in the finance committee today, and I'll try to put a budget so that we can put more investment into Khuddam hockey, sir. if that's okay with you. Is that okay?
Good. Now, what is your question, please?
Huzur, in the 10 years that
Arshad?
you've been here,
Arshad, you are exception to the rule. You will never get old. He's very young, always. MashaAllah.
Huzur, in the 10 years you've been here, I've only asked you one question, so can I take this opportunity to ask you two?
One about your getting old or
No.
not?
We'll do that privately. The first question is an observation which I would like a comment or views from you. Doing tabligh nowadays, I tend to find that a lot of people within the Christian and the Muslim world, we've got all the arguments for them. We've got all the books that back us with what we need to do. But what I see today is that a lot of these people aren't either Christians or aren't Muslims. And they believe in some other religion, some sort of spiritualism or faith healing, stone healing and tarot cards and things like that. And a lot of Westerns are actually involved in Buddhism and Hinduism. We don't seem to tackle that.
You do
And
what?
we don't seem to tackle those people because they are the majority now in England. I mean, even at schools, they don't teach Christianity as such. They teach all the religions, including these type of religions as well. But we don't seem to have enough knowledge on those to...
Why not?
There just isn't enough information available.
You see, this is not happening accidentally. This is happening out of a design. They want to amalgamate the whole society into something nondescript, whereby they will not be disciplined by their own respective teachings. So everything is all right. You see, do something of this and something of that. This is how they are attempting to amalgamate the non-Western societies with their own, so that there are no taboos in any respect and they mix up without any regards to the instructions from God or God's teachings. So this is a very cunning ploy by them. In the name of freedom, everything is all right, go ahead, do something of Buddhists, choose something of Hindus and this and that. These attempts are not new. They have always been a conspiracy against God. And whenever they are attempted, for a while they work and then they fail. There is not something new. Don't believe that it has started happening only in this age. At Akbar's time, he himself attempted to create a mixed up society whereby Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists, they could all share the same sort of social values without having reference to their own divine books. So to amalgamate things and make a sort of religion is a man's attempt, and man-made things never prosper in contrast to Allah's things. God's creation always wins. So this is a phase. Sometimes cults become popular, and people think now the whole world will turn to cults. They come and go. They're like fashions. But solid religious values, they stay. They're not transient phases in the trends of human history. They're permanent fixtures. And that is why the Holy Quran gives the parable of a flood. It said when it rains heavily, you see the flood water rise and the valleys are filled to the brim. Then it raises many things with it, some rich soil, some other elements, etc. But also there is froth on the top of that. What is visible is froth. But when everything settles down, the froth disappears and vanishes. What remains is only the solid values which benefit the world or the soil later on. So you must work in the light of this parable mentioned by the Holy Quran. We are for solid values, for permanent changes in the behavior of man so that he becomes a better animal. And don't be dispirited or oppressed by the lack of response, because maybe it is your fault. Maybe the way they can be made interested has not been employed by you. So I have spoken on this subject. I don't want to take up more time, because otherwise, if I once enter the discussion, then there will be no end to it. So let's stop here. You've got the clue, I hope. You can listen to those cassettes where I dealt with this subject exactly, how to make people interested in religion, those who are atheistic in their attitudes, who are only superficially religious, who are, who want to retain their freedom and yet become religious as much as they like. These are the basic crooked thinking and trends in man, which result in occultism and superstitionism and thisism and thatism. So you must tackle with the problem itself, analyze and diagnose the disease. Only then you can devise something to cure, because prescription always depends on the right diagnosis. So there is so many possibilities. How can I discuss all or even sample possibilities at this time? So you better start thinking in those lines, and inshallah God will give you light. Okay?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Can I ask you the second question now?
Was it the first question only?
This is the first question. If not, I can give.
Okay.
The second question was, I was speaking to an Iranian individual, and although he's anti-Khomeini, once I just described Ahmadiyyat and Hazrat Mirza Ahmad's message. He said, I understand what you're saying and it's very appealing, but you've been here 100 years, but there's no impact on the world. A lot of people know where, you go to little villages in all the world and they know about Ayatollah Khomeini. He wasn't backing Ayatollah, but he was saying they all know him, but this is the first time I'm hearing, but you go to the villages, no one knows of Hazrat Mirza Ahmad. So if it's taken 100 years, it's too slow. Why shouldn't be a bigger
impact? Just a minute. You ask him, there was oil in the world for billions of years. And human beings, when they were born, they used to see the oil on the surface. They never noticed, they never utilized it. So because it took so long for them to understand the value of the oil, you should not start utilizing it now. Why should you start trying to get benefit out of oil? On the same ground, you can say, because this is something which was so insignificant in the sight of men, that although it was here on earth, available for them, and they used to see it, sometimes bubbling out by itself, and they never cared about it. Before that there was coal, and they ignored it altogether. And there are so many precious metals which are now used to improve the quality of human life, which were seen and totally ignored by people. So the ignorance of people doesn't mean that the thing which is being ignored has no value, or because it was ignored before, so it should continuously be ignored now. That's very stupid logic, very, very distorted logic. So you tell them, must see whether it's useful or not. If it is not useful, then throw it away, even if all the people practice it. And we prove to you that the Christianity as understood today is not useful, it is harmful. So what if 1 billion people are Christians? So thus the number doesn't mean anything, the slow pace of advancement doesn't mean anything, they are irrelevant questions. Most of these people from Far East are Christians now. Now you can turn back to him and say, tell me about 100 years after Jesus Christ came. How important had Christianity become? How many countries have taken note of Christianity? You'll be surprised to see that today, after 100 years, we are in 142 countries of the world. And the Christianity had reached altogether in totality not more than 28. I have been working on it with reference to historical geographies and historical reports, and the best margin you could give them was 28 countries. Even if you include just one missionary, Christian missionary having reached there. That was about 100 years after Christianity. And now 100 years after Hazrat Mirza Ahmad of Qadian, people have taken such note of Ahmadiyya that wherever I go, even ministers come, the parliamentarians come, all the dignitaries come. Not that I find any honor in that, but in response to your question, I am telling you that this is the dignity which Ahmadiyya has earned for itself, the respect which it has earned. So why don't you tell him all this? Tell him, compare the present of Ahmadiyya with your past of that age. That will be a fair comparison. Otherwise, to compare a child of 1 year with a child of with a man of 60 years is no comparison at all. Very stupid comparison, isn't it?
Mm.
And it's not only the age which matters, there are other factors also which matter. Now, to end up on a happier note, let me tell you of a joke which just belongs to this category. There was a mouse only 2.5 years old, but he was full grown, of course. He had finished almost his youth and was entering sort of Ansarullah,
Like the hockey team.
As it was strolling in the jungle, he saw a child of an elephant. It's quite huge and big. So they started chatting to each other. They became very friendly. And suddenly the mouse thought how old he would be. If I'm 2.5 years, let's see how old he is. He said, Brother Elephant, how old would you be? He said, 2.5 years. And this mouse shuddered. So the elephant child took notice of this and in response said, well, how old would you be? He said, the problem is, although I'm 2.5 years, but I have been rather ill. I have not been enjoying good health. So it is an uneven comparison they are making. They are making the comparison with the Christianity of 2,000 years old, which has reached its age, full blossom of the age, and now it's about to reach the edge of the grave. And they are comparing with a child of 100 years. In history of man, this is a small child's age, in fact. So let them compare
Right.
the Christianity of 100 years with the Ahmadiyyat of 100 years, okay?
Thank you.